Labs 1, 2, 3. This is where we left off. We had a ball, and as I pushed the keys, notice the vector changes. Cool. Well, I want this thing to move, right? So very easy to do. I'm just going to click on the action browser. This ball is a physics object. It has properties of a physics object, which means I can add force. Adding force is just like physics. Like if you guys remember your high school physics class, hopefully, force imparts like momentum onto the ball. The thing is, if I want to add force to it, I get this little error that says requires rigid body component. A rigid body is just a physics term for something that it's not soft, it's not like a ball of goo or anything, it's actually a rigid sphere. So I can click here and I can add it. And notice here it added the rigid body over here. Cool. And I am going to add force. So there's a couple things I need to set up here. First, I need to tell it what force I'm going to add. So I'm just going to directly add input here. Okay? And I'm going to do it every single frame. Now that means that I'm going to keep adding force all the time. If I don't have this thing checked, what that means, it's only going to add force one time forever. That's it. Just once and it's done, which is not enough for us to be able to control it. We're constantly moving the ball around with the keyboard, so we always need to apply it every frame. Okay? And then finally, there's one more thing I want to do. I'll spend a little bit of time talking about this because I kind of glossed over it in the lab. I asked you guys to put the camera in this relative to checkbox, right? I asked you guys to drag this main camera here. Why did I do that? Well,
it centers the pivot point to the camera.
Yeah, that's basically what it ends up doing. So to describe it a little bit in simpler terms, when I'm playing an RPG, or let's say I'm playing Zelda or a third-person game, and I'm looking at my character, like imagine this is my character on screen, and I have my controller in my hand, and I hit right. Which direction would you expect him to go? Right, hopefully. He's going to move, not left. If I hit right, I would hope that he would move right. But right is relative, right? Right with respect to what? Like I'm looking at this guy, and I push right on my controller. If he turns right, or even walks to the right, what is that relative to?
That would be his right.
It's his right? Like where he is? But at the same time, it's actually relative to where I'm looking at right now. Like for instance, here's the difference. It's probably easier for me to explain when I don't have anything in here. So here's my ball. I don't know if you guys have tried this without doing this step. So I'm gonna set my camera to look down. Let me set up in a local space here. I'm just going to pull the camera back a little bit. So there's my camera, and here's my game. Left. Down. Cool. What if I put the camera on the other side? So let's just say I move this thing, and I spin it around like this. So what direction do you think I'm hitting right now?
Right.
I am hitting right. How'd you know that?
Because the camera isn't relative to that object, so...
Yeah. So what direction do you think I'm hitting right now?
Down.
I'm hitting down right now. I'm hitting right as well. So what happens to the ball when I hit right? Moves to the left? It even gets crazier though. Like what if I put it not on the opposite side? What if I just like moved it over here? Like this. I'm still looking at the ball. Now, which direction is the ball going to go when I hit right?
Up with it? Down or something.
I'm hitting right and it's going up right now. What direction would I like the ball to go when I hit right?
Right.
I'd like it to go to the right when I hit right. So that's why when you have this sphere and it asks you what would you like your movement to be relative to, you want all of your relative movements to be based off the camera. So if I drag the camera in here now on my sphere, like that, and then I play, now if I hit right, what direction will it go?
Right.
Right. And I'm hitting down. It's really important that you do that, right? Did I just confuse anyone right now? Because I want to make sure that this is clear. Like I'm hitting right now. It's basing the input relative to where the camera is. This is camera relative movement. It's a really common thing in third-person games. Like you want wherever the camera is looking, that if I hit right, that my player moves right on the screen. Okay. It doesn't really matter where my camera is now. I can move my camera over here. I can move it really high up too. Let's say I look like almost straight down. Let's just put this camera on the sphere and let's make it look straight down onto the camera, onto the ball. Okay. So I'm going to reset the rotation and I'm just going to pitch this thing down 90 degrees. So there's my ball. Super tiny. So there's my ball. It's actually not rolling because I think I broke it. Right, so looking straight down, actually, yeah, that's the only thing. You can't really have it move straight down. This is the gimbal lock that I was talking about. You actually have to tilt it just a little bit, like that. And now the ball's rolling. Oops, it's attached. Let me do that. Okay, now the ball is moving. I'm looking almost straight down at it, and the ball is moving as if I'm pushing right, and it's moving to the right. Okay, which means you can put the camera anywhere in your level, and as long as you have the relative to filled in here, it will just work. Okay. All right, so let's set up the trigger now so that it plays a sound, and I'll show you guys how to set up a trigger to make it jump. First, let's rotate it so I can actually see something. I don't know why Unity is so super slow today. All right, so we're going to just go into standard assets. I have some prototyping assets from Unity. Let's just add a, I think I want, which one of these things do I want? Platform? This guy? Shrink this guy down. It's going to be my platform where I put my trigger. And this is exactly what we did last time in class. So I'm going to add my cube, scale this guy up. I'm going to turn off his renderer and turn on the trigger. Cool. Add a component for FSM. In here, I'm going to rename this thing to be waiting. Add a trigger. And this trigger is set up so when anything enters it, I can send an event. I'm going to say player enter. Just like that here. Add another state that says player enter or triggered. I can just connect this here like this, and I can have it play a sound. And I can pick a sound here. Okay, really simple. And if I want this thing to happen more than once, I just basically put a finish transition from here to here. Okay. I literally just roll over there. Okay, cool. That's the lab, but let's do something a little bit more. I'd like to get this thing to make the player jump when he enters it. So there's a couple ways to do that, but the easiest way to do that is I need to get the player, and I just need to add force to him. Just like what we're doing when we're moving the player around with the keyboard, we can add force to him to push him up really high when he touches it. This is also how you get him to jump if you wanted to bind to the space bar. So instead of playing, maybe I do keep playing a sound, I want to add a force to the player. Okay. And the player, I want to add a force in Y. Let's add like, I don't know, 50. And that's it. So the thing is that it's asking me what game object to add force to. The problem is I can't just use owner here. If I use owner here, who's it going to add force to? So what do I have selected right now? I have the cube selected. Let's call this thing the trigger. I'm asking this question to everyone, anyone that can answer it. I have this add force action. Who is it going to add force to right now?
The player, the ball.
No, it's not.
No?
What do I have selected right now? The trigger.
The trigger.
So it's going to add the force to the trigger. It says use the owner here, right? Instead, I want to specify a game object. Now, there's two ways to do this. One is without using a variable. So let me show you that first. If I don't want to use a variable, I could just drag the player into here, and that will work. However, because we're talking about variables here, let me show you guys how to set up this using a variable. So the trigger event has a cool little drop-down box that says, hey, I will push into a variable who touched me, in case you care about that. And I do in this case. I'm going to store the player in a variable that's a game object. So I'm going to create a new variable for the player that's a game object type. Make sure I'm recording here. Cool. Sometimes I forget. And then here in store collider, I'm going to put that in here. All right, so watch this variable. I'm not going to do anything else. I'm actually going to disconnect these two. I'm just going to delete this transition. And I'm just going to do this. So I'm going to roll into there. Look what happened. Stored the sphere, which is my player. I can even rename the player here. The player. Play. And why is this important? Well, you want to know usually what thing touched you. So here again, here's a trigger, and I'm storing the collider here, and there's the player. Because a lot of times you want to do something to the person that touched you. This is going to be really important once we start using bullets and we make guns in our games, because you want bullets and guns and enemies to do different things based on what they hit. You've never really played a game, I'm sure, where an enemy shot a bullet and well, maybe he did. There's friendly fire, but like in like Space Invaders or something, enemy bullets don't hit other enemies. And also, usually your bullets don't hurt yourself or your teammates unless friendly fire is on. Because that behavior changes, you do have to know what things hit you. So the reason why I'm also storing it here is that now that I have stored the player in this variable, I can use that here and add force. I can just select the player as a variable. This little button right here changes from picking an object that I can drag, so I can like drag the camera in here, for instance, or I can click this button. It gives me a list of variables to pick from, and I'm going to pick the player there. Okay, so now that everything's set up, what you should see is that I go into the state, and the player will get force applied to him as soon as I enter. You'll see it go triggered, and the player got a little bump. Maybe I need to make this a little bit higher. Maybe 500. Oop. Cool, right? Also, you notice how my ball is like super slow? So let's adjust that now too. You can increase the speed of the player just by having this multiplier on the input. I'm going to make him like, I don't know, 8. And now this ball I have a lot more control over it. And this is totally up to you to control how fast you want to make it. If I just get this right, every time I enter it, it's going to make me bounce. I can actually get a little double jump. Okay. Cool. All right. So why don't we take a break now and come back in half an hour, and then we'll finish off the lecture.